Hey everybody, welcome to PC Perspective. I'm Ryan Shrout with Alan Malventano. We are going to talk about a preview of the GeForce GTX 1080 graphics card. We got ours in right here. This is a preview, it's not a review.
True.
The reviews will go up later this month at some point. I don't know if that's particularly on NDA, but we didn't really get a chance to discuss the kind of public unveiling that they had last Thursday night. NVIDIA hosted a live stream. And they were from Austin, Texas, I guess, and they kind of revealed a fair amount of information about the GTX 1080. And they had, we'll talk about the GTX 1080. We'll also talk about a couple of the other things that they mentioned briefly, other products. They talked about a screenshot utility called Ansel. They talked about,
I hadn't heard about that.
They talk about some cool stuff. We'll talk about it when we get to the end of that. But really, I think what most people are interested in, they want to talk about and hear about is the graphics card itself. So we did get in our GTX 1080. It is a Pascal-based GPU. If we want to talk about just like raw specifications, you're looking at 2,560 CUDA cores, processor cores. Right. It is GDDR5X memory running at 10 gigabits per second. It's rated at 9 teraflops compute. It has a $599 MSRP. And it has a $699 Founders Edition, which we'll figure out as we go as well. And it will be shipping on May 27th. You'll be able to start buying them on May 27th.
From NVIDIA?
From NVIDIA, I assume. They haven't really gone into like when partners are selling, when they're selling. The Founders Edition discussion is very complex and still has a lot of question marks. And if an email happens to come in while we're recording this video, I'll update my thoughts. But it
looks like that date you just said was supposedly for the Founders Edition.
Yes. Yeah. As far as we know, this is the only one that exists yet. Right. There will be partner boards with custom coolers and all that.
I would imagine like every other.
There will be EVGA will have theirs, MSI, Asus, they'll all have their custom editions. They also announced a GTX 1070, which is rated at 6.5 teraflops, 8 gigs of memory, GDDR5, not GDDR5X. 379 MSRP, 449 Founders Edition,. June 10th. So focusing on the 1080 because this is the one we have. 2560 CUDA cores, 1607 megahertz base clock.
That's pretty high.
That's really high. It's higher than I think a lot of people expected it to be. The boost clock is rated at 1733.
That's, again, really high.
And they showed at the event overclocks over 2 gigahertz. Right? And if you think about it, like the GTX 980, I think it has a base clock of like 1036 or 1060 or something like that, just at almost at a gigahertz. Right? So we're talking about a significant increase in clock speed. We're talking about more shaders, more compute cores as well. 8 gigs of memory instead of 4, 256-bit memory bus, so 320 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, because this is the first GDDR5X product we've seen announced as well. And it only has one 8-pin power connector, and it's doing all this at 180 watt TDP. Right? And it's so I don't know what people expected. I don't know what
I don't think they expected this much.
I agree, right? And so it's really impressive. They didn't show any specific benchmarks. If you go to the GeForce.com page, they actually have like a product kind of detail up there. They're talking about up to 3x better performance versus, I assume they're comparing like same segmented price on previous generations.
Yeah, I think that's what they were doing there. And then some of their X rating stuff is specific to VR.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Right, like I think there was a 2x thing that they were specifically saying, but that was for VR cases or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So so if you compare the GeForce GTX 1080, the new one, the GTX 980, which I have one sitting here as well. You're talking about 2x performance. Like, so this will be faster than a pair of 980s in SLI. In some instances, right?
In some instances.
And that's not going to be a global thing. Like on their website, they actually list Rise of the Tomb Raider and DirectX 12. A 1080 is about 1.8, 1.9x the performance.
It's still a pretty good
980, and The Witcher 3, it's like 1.8x the speed. That's really, really impressive.
It's impressive for generation to generation, because typically it's like, 20, 30% or so. Like, that's what we're used to seeing, right? If you went from like a 780 to a, like that would have been, which way did they
go?
To
a 980.
Yeah, it went from 780 to 980. That was like about 20 or 30% jump.
Yep.
Right. This seems to be a lot more than a 20 or 30%
it's more,
jump.
Yeah, it's more than that. It's pretty impressive. So obviously we'll have to talk about benchmarks and all that in specifics in the near future. But it's going to be an impressive part. And I think there was a lot of debate, like even while the stream was going on, I was talking with Will Smith and stuff. But what do you think the price is going to be? They've talked about performance. They've talked about kind of some of the features and capabilities. What do you think the performance is going to be? And a lot of people expected it to be higher than where we're at.
Yeah.
Because the thought process is this generation is going to have to last a little bit longer than it has in the past. So they're going to start up high, so they have room to kind of lower the price as a year goes by, and they can kind of figure it out from there.
Sure.
But it's launching at $599, which I believe is $50 less than the 980 launched at.
I think so.
There was 980 Ti launched at $649, I think. It was one of those.
Yeah, it was one of those.
I think it was the 980 Ti. And so the claim is here, like they're talking about this being faster than a Titan X. Even the GTX.
That was another thing I don't think people were expecting them to say.
Well, yeah, because the 980 Ti and the Titan X are essentially the same
they're
hardware.
Similar cards, yeah.
But even the GTX 1070 is faster than the Titan X, right? And that's a $379 product. They're more aggressive on pricing than I think a lot of people expected. Some other stuff that came out, they talked about the Sli Bridge. They have new Sli bridges. They're called Sli HB bridges, stands for high bandwidth, doubles the available transfer bandwidth compared to NVIDIA Maxwell architecture. Now we don't know yet how much of that is the bridge, how much of that is the logic on the board itself, or maybe GPU, I/O.
Well, I could say I'm looking at these connectors here, and they look like the same connector.
Yeah, they have the same number of pins on them. It's probably that they're connecting both of them at the same time. If you look at the the Sli bridges they show on their website, you can only see the front facing of them, but you assume it's connecting to both connections on the card, right? And so maybe that's how you get double the available transfer rate. Which is important when we're getting into higher resolutions and higher frame rates and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, because you're trying to do 4K SLI and transfer an extra, the frame that the other card rendered to card B back to card A.
Yep.
Like it needs to be able to get that frame across the bus quickly. So.
Yep. It's and in terms of like the design of the card, it's very similar to what you have here. Like the coloration, it's obviously when we saw all these images kind of leak out over the last couple of weeks, very angular designs on everything. It's still got a blower fan design to it, but it's high build quality. There's a backplate. I know people always complained about the 980 Ti not having a backplate, even though the 980 reference ones did.
There's a backplate. It does not have the removable door.
Correct.
For the cooling.
Yeah, it doesn't have the removable door like the reference did here. Yeah. Like it had this kind of bulge on the back for when you did SLI.
I think just without the
they didn't have that issue there.
Just by not having the door, I think that's going to improve airflow anyway. Even like.
I think so. Yeah, I think it will. Display output connectivity, 3 DisplayPort, 1 HDMI, and 1 dual-link DVI. It's identical to that.
Yep.
So you still got the HDMI, so you can hook up your Oculus Rift or your HTC Vive. Obviously, you got to have VR support for all that.
It does look very similar, though.
It looks very, very similar.
Yeah. It's a nice redesign, though. Like it's. More of a chiseled angle.
I like the look of it.
Yeah.
For sure. Some people are hit or miss on it. Yeah. Obviously, the GeForce GTX logo lights up, and again, as we talked about before, one single 8-pin power connector, which is actually really, really, really cool.
That's pretty impressive given the performance.
Yeah. I mean, considering how much power a 980 Ti draws, it's 250 watts.
Yeah.
This is 70 watts less than that. It's outperforming it by 1.3, 1.4x. 2 of these are going to draw 300 watts or so.
Right.
Right, because I think these were rated at 165 each.
I think so, yeah.
So again, getting close to that with a single 180 watt card, it's pretty impressive. Now there's a lot of question, right? So we talked about pricing. There's a $599 listing, and then it's $599 MSRP, $699 Founders Edition.
Okay.
Now, there's still a lot of questions on this. I think.
Like, what do you get with the Founders Edition?
Yeah, like what is a Founders Edition? And here's what I am almost positive is going to be the case. This is the Founders Edition that you're looking at right here. It is what used to be called a reference design.
Okay.
Right. And if you think about it, starting with like the 700 series, maybe even the 600 series, NVIDIA put more effort into their reference designs than they had in the past, right? This GTX 980 is a good cooler. It's a blower starter cooler, which some people don't like, but it has a lot of benefits for getting the hot air out of your system as opposed to just recirculating it inside your system. Very good build quality, a lot of attention to detail, high quality parts, right? And so my opinion, my view is I think NVIDIA got tired of being called a reference design when they were putting a lot of effort into it. So they're basically kind of going, we're going to rename it now. It's Founders Edition because it's straight from us. I think it's going to be sold through them. Although, according to a couple of add-in board partners I've talked to, they're going to have access to this design. Like they're going to sell these cards.
In the past too. You could have, like
you could get an EVGA 980 that looked just like this, and it maybe had an EVGA sticker on the fan instead, or maybe it didn't. But there were rumors about, these are going to have higher clocks out of the box, or they're going to have a different VBIOS on them, so they're unlock higher voltages. All indications are that is not the case.
Okay.
That it's really more of a matter of this is what's going to be on sale first on May 27th, and then after that, it's going to take a little bit for board partners to get theirs in, build their custom designs, get their custom coolers out there, and do it that way.
So this is the first time we're seeing NVIDIA do that, though, right? Like they're selling these through them.
We had I think like the Titan Z was sold through them direct.
Yeah, but this is
they do kind of have boxes like this at Best Buy-ish, but it's very low volume.
Right. Whereas this is, I'd imagine, on that date, there's probably going to be a lot of orders.
There will be a lot of orders on that date, and I expect them to sell through quite a bit. And a lot of the price difference, they'll say it's because we're using high quality parts and the cooler is custom designed and all this sort of stuff. Right. I think a lot of it also is politics. They don't want to step on their partners' toes by offering the same product earlier at the same price and with a high quality cooler. Yeah. So they're saying, okay, our caveat is we'll sell it at $100 more. This is really just the people who need it immediately day one.
It's like early adopter fee.
It is. It very much is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems very much like an early adopter fee for it. And
as long as that doesn't go too long, then I'm probably okay.
Yeah. If we have to wait until June 27th before we see any other cards, that's too long. If we have to wait until June 10th or something like that, when the GTX 1070 starts to sell, we also start to see other retail 1080s out there. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. If it's too long, it becomes too monopolistic on NVIDIA's part, and you might start to see some kind of grumbling about that.
I don't think they would let it go that long because that would
I wouldn't.
All their other partners.
I wouldn't think so either. So we'll have more details on this, obviously, coming up pretty soon. I will tell you the NDA is before the 27th for when like benchmarks and all that stuff will happen. But we're starting working on this, obviously, as soon as this video is over. So a couple of other things for those of you who are interested that want to stick around and listen. They talked about some other things too. They talked about a tool called Ansel. Right?
Is that the screenshot?
It is the screenshot tool. I'm going to bring up the page here so I can make sure I get it.
Let you take a screenshot within a game?
It is a driver-based screenshot utility, right? Which is actually brand new.
Is it like kind of built into GFE? Is that, I guess?
No.
No?
So, it kind of it is, right? It's built into...
Because GFE
trying to find the page here.
Video capture now, right?
Yep.
If you want to do that, so it kind of makes sense for it to just be added to that interface or something.
But here's what's interesting. Like, you basically pause the game, and then you can free float around in the environment. It's not just... Like, it is a separate camera that exists inside the 3D world.
It's a driver-level camera.
Yeah. It's very odd to me. And when I first saw them talk about it, I think it was the first thing he actually talked about was this. And I thought, wow, every game developer is going to be super pissed, right? Because they go through all this work of like determining what you can see.
You're always supposed to see this.
And when you see it, and now you can just pause it. They demoed The Witness as a game that they could like just kind of float around and do a bunch of stuff in. They demoed The Witcher. But here's the thing: at the end of it, they ended up saying supported games. So the developer has to be involved in some way, either in an approval process or like, hey, let's validate this and make sure it works.
Because it potentially might look really bad. Like if you have a game that's intentionally just not even drawing stuff that's behind other things.
Exactly. exactly.
The game engine is taking shortcuts, not necessarily shortcuts, but like
there's the potential for it to break a bunch of stuff, or for you to see how the sausage is made, right? And I could see that being a problem.
You turn around and you just look.
There was
and there's just nobody there.
Right. there was a tweet I saw about somebody saying like, oh, I guess I have to encrypt my view matrices now on this so that the driver can't do that. Ooh. Right. And I think at the end of it ended up being like, hey, this is it might be a per game basis.
Like a voluntary basis.
Yeah, and in which case, okay, fine. The other kind of technology they announced was VRWorks Audio. This was, as the name implies, an audio kind of driver and technology for VR-based systems. They call it a true path-traced audio solution.
Okay.
It's you need to experience it in person to really understand it, right? It's obviously built for VR, and it's built to kind of improve kind of the feeling and the immersion of audio. Okay. So sounds interesting.
The GPU's handling.
It's path traced audio. It is basically like audio bouncing around a room, which right, which can be really cool. And I was told that it really only takes like 30 lines of code for a game developer to implement.
That's like ray tracing for audio.
It is it's path traced audio. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So I wasn't there. I didn't go to the event, so I didn't get to hear any demos of it. Yeah. But I was told it was pretty impressive.
That would potentially be really, really quick on a GPU because it's just a single path or just two paths that you're tracing.
Yeah, 2-channel.
It's like 2 pixels worth of work.
Yeah.
Right? Like ray trace pixels.
Yeah.
So
and like I said, they said it's only like, I was told, again, by somebody at NVIDIA that the developers are very excited about it because it's like 30 lines of code to implement it, and it just kind of goes on top of your initial
that's cool.
audio engine stuff.
Huh.
And the last one that they talked about was simultaneous multi-projection, which is a perspective correct type of stuff. It has uses for both VR and standard displays.
Okay.
So the thing
for VR, it's a projection for each eye.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. What is it for regular display?
So NVIDIA Surround, multi-monitor, multi-display configurations. You know how on the side monitors you get this kind of warping?
They go and get stretched out.
It gets stretched out because you have one viewport.
Yeah, and it's trying to wrap around.
And it's trying to wrap around. So what they do here is you have a triple monitors. You could do three different projections. Right, like one for each monitor, one kind of camera for each monitor.
So it renders its own scene on each monitor.
Yep. And so
that should get rid of the distortion.
It should have no distortion on the edges. Yeah. Now I don't know how much work that needs from the developer yet. It's probably not an automatic thing that can just work. Although it might have something to do with how they did Ansel, right? The screenshot technology where they just said, screw it, we're just going to create a camera in this 3D world because they have all the information about the 3D world.
They might be able to add it in. They probably have to be game-specific support within the driver to be able to add something like that in. But it's a cool idea, though, and that would definitely, it'd be really nice for, racing games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The side displays are really just...
Anytime, even like on an FPS game, or you played Skyrim, or you played Fallout, those side monitors... I would say half of them it was useless because it was so distorted. Yeah. So if NVIDIA has found a way to fix that and correct that, then I'm all for it.
That could make it usable, whereas if you're facing one way in a game and you actually just want to look over at the side monitor, it used to be you look over and it was really only useful for periphery stuff anyway.
Correct.
Right? Now it could potentially just be like, oh, I'm just going to look over there instead of having to turn.
Yep.
Right, because it would look the same as if you were looking
It won't be distorted and crappy.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Cool. So that's kind of the stuff they've talked about publicly. They had an editor's day the next day on Friday where everybody got NDA, discussions about the architecture and all that stuff. So we'll obviously be able to talk about that whenever the NDA releases on this. So that's the 1080 and the 1070, right? It creates... It's super interesting now, right? Because first of all, you've got all these 980 Ti, 980, and 970 users that are worried about what are they going to upgrade? What are they going to? I imagine if you look on eBay today, there's a whole bunch of 980 Ti's for sale, and it also creates a really interesting playing field for AMD, right? We know Polaris is coming. We know that they're launching in the Computex timeframe. From what they've shown so far, Polaris 10 and 11, they're more mainstream products than this. They're not up to the performance level that the 980 will have, that the 1080 will actually have. So depending on, I think we may have an interesting summer here where NVIDIA launches products up here and AMD launches products down here, and they're not directly competing with each other anymore. Now, it's possible that NVIDIA's $379 price point on the GTX 1070 was kind of a surprise, and AMD may go, oh crap. Yeah. But if AMD is targeting the $200 to $300 price range,
they could still clean up.
They could still do a very good job in that area until NVIDIA releases their lower cost parts. So it's kind of a unique release in that they're both well timed against each other, but they're different product stacks, at least it appears to be. So that's all we have for our preview of the GeForce GTX 1080. If you guys have any questions or comments, let us know. I'll answer what I can, although it's probably not a whole lot. And in which case now I sit back and wait for a driver.
We don't have a driver yet.
Otherwise, it's just a paperweight. So we'll use it as a paperweight to finish tax paperwork until then, and we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed this content, consider supporting in-depth technical content by contributing at patreon.com/PCPer.